Carter, you missed that target again. I'll bury you in this dirt. Drill Sergeant Hayes thundered, his voice slashing through the September wind like a knife through my frayed nerves. My name's Johnny Carter, and after clawing my way through a brutal month at Fort Dix in August 1967, running till my legs turned to jelly, sleeping on jagged rocks while mosquitoes chewed me raw, I thought I'd seen the worst this place could dish out. Then September crashed in, and they shoved an M16 into my trembling hands, hauled me to the rifle range, and drowned my world in a storm of gunfire and dread. That first shot kicked like a wild stallion, rattling my bones, and every squeeze of the trigger was a reckoning. Either I'd prove I belonged, or I'd show I was a dead man walking, with Vietnam looming closer, a shadow I couldn't shake. 33 days had ticked by since that Greyhound bus dumped me at Fort Dix, and the kid who'd stood on Mom's porch in Ohio, hugging her tight under a pink July sky, was slipping away like dust through my fingers. August had been a relentless grinder. Every dawn ripped open with reveille at 0500, the bugle's shrill wail yanking me from dreams of golden cornfields swaying in the breeze, Marion's laugh echoing across the yard, Dad's voice calling me in from the barn. Every dusk, I'd collapse onto a bunk that creaked like an old man's bones, Tommy's snores rumbling from the top rack, a jagged rhythm that somehow lulled me to sleep. My hands weren't soft anymore, not the hands that once tossed a baseball with Dad on lazy Sundays. They were rough now, calluses thick as leather from hauling gear, knuckles scraped bloody from crawling under wire, fingertips stained black with rifle oil. My shoulders carried the mark of that damn duffel bag, a deep groove where the strap bit into my flesh, and my legs throbbed with a constant ache, the memory of miles run on gravel and dust etched into every muscle. Fort Dix had reshaped me, slow and unforgiving, like a river wearing down stone. The first week I'd stumbled through marches, my boots too big, my steps clumsy, Hayes' voice a sledgehammer in my ears. Carter, you move like a drunk cow. Pick it up. I learned to keep pace, to ignore the blisters swelling inside my socks, the way they popped and bled, sticking to the leather. Day 3, they'd made us run. 5 miles, the sun a white-hot hammer overhead, dust choking my throat, my lungs burning like I'd swallowed fire. I'd lagged, my knees buckling, and Hayes had been there, his scarred face inches from mine, yelling, "You think Charlie's going to wait for you to catch your breath? Move!" I moved, somehow staggering to the finish, Tommy clapping my back, his grin wide. "You're tougher than you look, Johnny," he'd said, and I'd nodded, too winded to answer, the taste of dirt lingering on my tongue. The second week, they'd thrown us into a pit, hand-to-hand drills, a circle of dirt surrounded by shouting recruits, the air thick with sweat and curses. Big Mike had towered over me, his fists like hams, and tossed me like I weighed nothing, his laugh booming as I hit the ground, dust billowing around me. "Get up, Carter! You're too pretty to stay down," he'd roared, and I'd scrambled up, fists clenched, my breath ragged, landing one weak punch to his chest before he floored me again, my cheeks scraping the earth. Hayes had watched, arms crossed, spitting tobacco. "Hit harder or die. Princess," he'd said, and I'd gotten up again, my hands shaking, my pride bruised worse than my face. By the third week, I could crawl under barbed wire without snagging my fatigues, the mud cold and slick against my belly, the barbs glinting inches above my head. Hayes barking, "Faster, you're dead if you're slow." I wasn't fast, but I kept moving, my elbows raw, my heart pounding, the memory of Dad teaching me to crawl through the barn loft flashing in my mind. Quieter times, softer dirt. Barracks 12 was my cage now, a squat box of splintered wood and stale air that smelled of mildew and unwashed bodies. The bunks were narrow, stacked too high, the mattresses thin and lumpy, sagging under our weight, stained with the sweat of countless recruits before us. The floor creaked with every step, a tired groan that matched the ache in my bones, and a single bulb overhead buzzed like a trapped wasp, casting jagged shadows across the walls, flickering when the wind rattled the windows. Tommy was my lifeline, his red hair aflare in the gloom, his voice cutting through the din with dumb jokes that somehow kept me sane. "We're gonna be legends, Johnny," he'd say, flicking a cigarette, but onto the floor, the ember glowing briefly before it died, smoke curling up in lazy spirals. Medals, girls, the whole damn show. I'd nod, force a half-smile, but my stomach churned every time I thought about what was next. The range, the bullets, the war waiting beyond. Eddie stayed quiet, hunched over his notebook under that buzzing light, scribbling lines and numbers I couldn't make sense of, maps of Philly streets, maybe, or tallies of push-ups, his pencil scratching soft against the paper. "Keeps me from losing it," he muttered one night, pushing his glasses up his nose, the lenses smudged with oil and dust, and I left it alone, glad he had something to hold on to. Big Mike filled the space with his bulk, 6'3", hands like slabs of meat, his bunk sagging under him every night, his snores a freight train that rattled the walls. He'd curse Hayes under his breath, his Texas drawl thick as molasses, "That bastard gonna kill us all." But he'd push through, his big frame heaving with every lap, every drill, a quiet strength I envied. They'd handed us the M16S in late August, a right that felt more like a sentence. 7 pounds of cold steel and polished wood. It thudded into my hands when Hayes tossed it over, his eyes narrow, his voice a growl. "This is your wife now. Carter, treat her right, or she'll bury you." I caught it, nearly dropped it, the weight dragging at my arms, and carried it ever since. Marches, drills, even to the latrine, the strap chafing my shoulder raw, a red welt blooming under my shirt. At night, I'd slide it under my bunk, run my fingers over the barrel, the stock, the trigger guard, tracing the smooth curves, trying to find something familiar in it, like Dad's old .22. I'd use to plink cans off the fence back home, the ping of metal sharp in the quiet air. But this wasn't Ohio, and the M14 wasn't for cans. It was for men, for blood, and I wasn't sure I could face that. Hayes made us clean them every evening, stripping them down as springs and pins, the oil slick under my nails, the smell sharp and bitter like gasoline and metal mixed. "You're not soldiers till you shoot," he'd growl, pacing the barracks, his boots thudding on the wood. "And most of you'll shoot like damn fools. Prove me wrong." The last days of August crawled by, each one a countdown to something bigger, heavier. I'd lie awake, the bulbs hum drilling into my skull, picturing Mom at the kitchen table, her hands folded over a chipped coffee mug, steam rising in the morning light, Dad out in the barn, the clank of his tools faint through the walls. Mary Ann's face flickered in, her brown eyes, her laugh when I'd tripped chasing her through the fields, the way she'd smelled like wildflowers and summer. I'd written Mom twice, short notes scratched out on crumpled paper. "I'm okay, Ma. It's loud here. Miss you." I didn't tell her about the sweat soaking my shirt, the yells splitting my ears, the way my hands shook when I held that rifle, the way I'd wake up gasping, dreaming of dirt and blood. September 3rd, 1967, loomed like a thunderhead rolling in, and I knew it'd test me. Break me or make me, no middle ground. September 3rd slammed into me like a freight train, dawn breaking cold and sharp over Fort Dix, the air crisp with the first hint of fall. Reveille hit at 0500, the bugle's wail slicing through the dark like a blade, and I jolted awake, my blanket twisted around my legs, the damp scent of dew-soaked grass seeping through the cracked window. Tommy groaned from the top bunk, rolling off with a thud that shook the frame, his boots hitting the floor beside me. "Rise and shine," he mumbled, rubbing his eyes with the heel of his hand, his red hair a wild tangle against the gray light. I swung my legs out, boots thumping the wood, the chill biting through my socks, and fumbled for my fatigues, olive drab, stiff with crusted sweat and dust, the fabric rough as I pulled it over my shoulders, the collar scraping my neck. My M14 waited under the bunk, its barrel glinting faintly in the dim glow of the bulb, and I slung it over my shoulder, the weight settling into that familiar ache, the strap tugging at the welt it had carved into my skin. Outside, the barracks yard was a blur of shadows and motion. Hayes already there, a hulking figure in the half-light, his voice booming over the crunch of gravel under 100 boots. "Range day, ladies. Move your sorry asses." His cap sat crooked, that scar of his catching the first rays like a jagged slash across the morning, and I fell in a line, the rifle bouncing against my back, my breath puffing white in the cool air. The march to the range was a mile, maybe more, cutting through the sprawl of Fort Dix. Low barracks with chipped paint, their windows dark and blank, a water tower looming like a silent giant, barbed wire fences stretching into the haze, glinting faintly as the sun climbed. The skies softened from gray to orange, the lights spilling over the trees, and I kept my eyes on the ground, counting steps. Left, right, the rhythm a lifeline against the thudding in my chest, the M16 strap digging deeper with every stride, the leather creaking against my shirt. The range opened up ahead, a long, flat stretch of dirt scarred by years of boots and bullets, lined with wooden targets 50 yards out, their black silhouettes stark against the green swell of the hill beyond, the grass patchy and worn. Sandbags marked the firing line, piled haphazardly, their canvas faded to a dull gray, frayed at the edges where the stitching had given way, and a handful of sergeants stood off to the side, arms crossed, faces carved from stone, their eyes tracking us like hawks. Hayes waved us in, his voice a thunderclap over the wind whipping through the open field. 10 men in time. Carter, you're up. Don't screw this. I stepped forward, my heart slamming against my ribs, my boots sinking slightly into the cracked dirt, and dropped to my knees behind a sandbag, the earth cold and gritty through my pants, tiny pebbles pressing into my skin like pinpricks. Tommy took the spot left of me, flashing that dumb grin, his freckles sharp in the morning light, his breath puffing out in little clouds. Eddie knelt right, his glasses slipping down his nose, his fingers fumbling as he adjusted them, his breath fogging the lenses. Hayes strode over, ammo crates clanking in his wake, the sound sharp against the rustle of the wind, and handed out rounds, 20 each, brass cartridges spilling into my palm, cold and smooth, heavier than they looked, their weight a quiet promise of what was coming. My fingers shook, fumbling as I loaded them into the magazine, the metal clicking softly against itself, each snap a jolt to my nerves, and I slid into the M14, pulled the bolt back, heard the sharp snap of it locking into place, the sound echoing in my skull. Lock and load. Hayes barked, pacing behind us, his boots kicking up little puffs of dust that stung my eyes, and I pressed the stock to my shoulder, my cheek brushing the wood, the grain rough against my skin, the faint smell of oil and polish rising from it. I sighted down the barrel, the target a hazy smear at first, 50 yards stretching out like a canyon, but I squinted, lined up the sights, front post centered in the rear notch, a black dot against the wood, and took a breath, my chest tight, my pulse thudding in my ears, a steady drumbeat drowning out the wind. Fire when ready. Hayes yelled, his voice a whip crack, and I squeezed. The M14 roared, a deafening crack that split the air, the recoil slamming my shoulder like a fist, jarring my teeth, the force rippling down my arm. I flinched, my eyes squeezing shut for a split second, and the shot went wild, kicking up a plume of dirt 10 feet left of the target, the dust swirling in the breeze, settling slow. Carter, you blind? Hayes bellowed, stomping over, his face inches from mine, his breath hot and sour with tobacco, veins bulging on his red neck, his scar a livid slash under his cap. Aim, you dumb son of a bitch, or I'll shove that rifle down your throat. I swallowed hard, my throat dry as sandpaper, my tongue sticking to the roof of my mouth, and nodded, my hands trembling as I reset, the M14 slick with sweat under my grip, the metal warm now from my touch. I fired again, slower this time, holding my breath. Crack! The bullet grazed the target's edge, splintering wood, a faint puff of sawdust rising into the air. Hayes grunted, a low rumble in his chest. Close enough, but not good, his eyes boring into me like he could see every doubt rattling around in my head. My shoulder throbbed, a dull ache spreading down my arm, my collarbone creaking under the strain, and my ears rang, a high-pitched whine drowning out the wind, the shouts, everything but the thud of my own heart. I fired again, then again, the M14 bucking each time, my aim a mess. Half the rounds missed, burying themselves in the dirt with dull thuds. The rest clipped the target's sides, ragged holes tearing through the wood, splinters scattering. Tommy's shot rang out beside me. A clean hit dead center, the target shuddering, and he hooped, turning to me, his grin wide, his teeth flashing white. "See that, Johnny? Easy as pie." I forced a smile, my lips tight, my jaw clenched, but my gut twisted. I wasn't like him, not even close, my hands still shaking, my breath ragged. Eddie's turn came, his glasses fogging, his shots spraying wild, left, right, into the hill beyond. And Hayes tore into him, voice sharp as a blade, cutting through the noise. "You gonna cry, Specs? Shoot straight, or get the hell out." Eddie's face flushed red, his hands fumbling, his shoulders hunching like he wanted to sink into the ground. But he kept firing, missing more than he hit, the dirt kicking up around him like a storm. Big Mike was next, and he was a damn machine. Every shot a bullseye, the target shredding under his steady hands, his big frame unmoving against the recoil, his breath even, his eyes locked on the black silhouette 50 yards out. Hayes clapped his back, a rare grin cracking his weathered face, his teeth yellowed from tobacco. "That's a soldier. Ladies, watch and learn." I stared, my own rifle shaking in my grip, a pang of something bitter curling in my chest. Jealousy, maybe, or just shame at my own sloppy aim, the way my shot strayed while Mike's punched clean through. The rest of the day dragged on, a grind of noise and sweat. 20 rounds gone, my shoulder bruised purple, swelling under my shirt, my ears buzzing like a swarm of bees trapped in my skull. Hayes didn't let up, his voice a constant lash. "Faster, Carter. Straighter, you idiot." And by dusk, I was spent, collapsing against the sandbag, the M16 heavy across my lap, my hands raw and trembling, the smell of gunpowder thick in my nose, clinging to my skin like a second layer. The range wasn't a one-day ordeal. It swallowed us whole for 2 weeks straight, dawn to dusk, till the crack of gunfire echoed in my dreams, and the taste of gunpowder coated my tongue, bitter and sharp. They marched us out every morning, the mile-long trek a ritual now, boots crunching gravel, the targets growing sharper in my sight each day, their black shapes a constant challenge against the green hill beyond. We started at 50 yards, prone on the dirt, the ground cold and hard under my chest, then moved to 100, kneeling in the dust, my knees grinding into pebbles, then 200, standing against the wind whipping across the field. Every position a fresh hell, every shot a test of nerve and muscle. The M14 got easier, or I got harder, the recoil softening from a punch to a shove, my hands finding the rhythm. Sight breathe, squeeze, my fingers steadying against the trigger, the metal worn from hours of use. Day 4 brought rain. Cold, steady drops that soaked my fatigues, turned the range into a muddy bog, the dirt sucking at my boots with every step, the air heavy with the smell of wet earth and rust. "You think Vietnam's got a roof?" Hayes yelled, pacing the line, water streaming off his cap, pooling in the creases of his scarred face, his boots splashing through puddles. "Shoot, damn it." I fired through the downpour, mud splashing my cheeks, the target a gray blur in the haze, the rain streaking my vision. The shot hit low, punching a ragged hole in the wood, the echo swallowed by the wet earth, and I grinned despite the sting in my eyes. First solid hit all week, the cold seeping into my bones. Tommy slipped beside me, landed hard on his ass, the mud splattering his face, and laughed, a wild, barking sound that cut through the rain. "Smooth, huh?" he called, scrambling up, his boots sloshing as Hayes barked. "Run it off, Red." Tommy took off, splashing through puddles, still grinning, his red hair plastered his forehead. While I reset, the M14 slick in my grip, water dripping from the barrel. Eddie found his footing that day, bracing his glasses with a finger, his shots tightening up. 3 hits out of 10, better than the wild sprays of before, the wood splintering under his aim. "Not bad, Specs," I muttered, my voice hoarse from the cold. And he nodded, a faint smile breaking through his usual frown, his breath puffing white in the damp air. Even Big Mike faltered once, the rain throwing off his aim, the bullet burying itself in the mud with a dull thud, and he cursed loud enough to scare the crows perched on the fence. "Goddamn water!" Hayes laughed, a rare, guttural sound that rumbled over the patter of rain, and moved on, his cap tilted against the downpour. My own aim steadied. 5 hits that day, the M14's kick a familiar ache, my shoulder a map of bruises under my soaked shirt. the fabric clinging to my skin like a second hide. Mistakes came, sharp and costly, cutting through the rhythm like a blade. Day 6, a kid named Riley, 2 squads over, forgot to clear his chamber after a dry-fire drill, his hands sloppy from the rain. He squeezed off a round, the cracks splitting the air, the bullet slamming into the dirt a foot from Hayes' boots, a geyser of dust and mud exploding upward, the sound sharp against the steady drip of water. Hayes lunged, grabbed Riley by the collar, hauled him up like a sack of grain, his face red with fury, water streaming down his cheeks. "You trying to kill me, you stupid bastard?" he roared, spit flying, his voice shaking the air, Riley's eyes wide and white, his hands shaking as he stammered, "No, sir." His rifle clattered to the ground, mud splashing, and they dragged him off, boots dragging ruts in the wet earth, his figure shrinking into the haze. He was gone by noon. No word, no trace, just a hole in the line where he'd stood. "That's what stupid gets you," Hayes said later, spitting into the mud, his voice flat, his eyes hard as flint. "Next one's out, too." I checked my rifle 3 times after that. Every load, every click, my fingers cold with sweat, my pulse a drumbeat in my throat, the rain washing over me like a penance. By day 10, I was hitting more than missing. 30 yards prone, a tight cluster of holes on the target, the wood splintering under my shots. The M14's roar a steady pulse now, the recoil a dull thud against my bruised shoulder. Tommy kept acing it, his targets a mess of bullseyes, his laugh ringing out after every hit, his voice cutting through the wind. "Beat that, Johnny!" Eddie scraped by, his aim shaky but growing, his glasses fogged but steady, while Big Mike stayed perfect, his big hands unmoved by the kick, his shots a quiet brag that didn't need words. Hayes watched, arms crossed, his yells less frequent but cutting deeper when they came. "Carter, you're still slow. Tighten it up." I nodded, fired again, hit center, the wood cracking, and felt a flicker of something. Pride, maybe, or just the relief of not screwing up. The range was breaking me down, tearing at the edges of who I'd been. But it was forging something new, piece by jagged piece, a soldier rising from the mud and noise. The range wasn't just about bullets. It was about us, the ragged pack thrown together in this churn of mud and gunfire, each of us clinging to something to keep from drowning. Tommy was my lifeline, his red hair aflare in the chaos, his voice a constant hum of dumb hope that somehow held me together. "We're going to be snipers, Johnny," he'd say, winking over a cigarette as we cleaned our rifles, the smoke curling up in thin wisps, the ember glowing briefly in the dim barracks light. "Back home, they'll write songs about us, ballads, the kind you hear on the radio." I'd roll my eyes, the corner of my mouth twitching, but it kept me sane, his grin a tether when the days dragged too heavy, his laugh a light in the dark when I'd wake gasping from dreams of dirt and screams. Eddie opened up slow, peeling back the quiet like a shell cracking, showing me his notebook one night under the flickering bulb, the pages crinkled and smudged with oil. He'd drawn maps, Philly streets winding like veins, tiny sketches of the range with targets marked by XS, a tally of shots in the margins. "Helps me think," he said, his voice soft, almost lost under the bulb's buzz, his glasses smudged with grime, his fingers trembling slightly as he turned the page. "Back home, I'd mapped the alleys, kept me out of trouble." I nodded, leaning closer, the pencil lines sharp against the paper, glad he'd found something to hold on to, something to keep him from breaking when Hayes' yells hit too hard. "You're good at that," I said, and he shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips, the first I'd seen in weeks. Big Mike was a mountain, 6'3", hands like slabs of meat, his bunk groaning under him every night, the frame creaking as he shifted. He'd softened, though, tossing me a cigarette one evening after a long day, his drawl thick as he lit it with a match, the flame flaring briefly in the dark. "You're tougher than you look, Carter. Didn't think you'd last past week 1. I took it, the smoke sharp in my lungs, curling up my nose, and muttered, "Thanks, I guess," the taste bitter but welcome. He'd grin, a rare crack in his scowl, and we'd sit there, silent, the barracks humming around us, the air thick with the smell of oil and sweat. But he clashed with Tommy, day 8, in the rain. Tommy pushed too far, calling him cowboy. While we reloaded, the word sharp over the patter drops. Mike swung, clipped Tommy's jaw with a wet smack, and they went at it, fists splashing mud, grunts and curses mixing with the downpour till Hayes broke it up, his voice a roar. "Run it off, you damn fools," he barked, sending them around the track. Tommy laughing through a bloody lip, Mike growling like a bear, his boots pounding the earth. Next day, Mike tossed Tommy a candy bar, muttered, "Truce, Red," and it was done. Rough, messy, but real, a bond forged in bruises. Riley's mess shook us harder, a crack in the rhythm that wouldn't heal. Day 6, that stray shot near Hayes' feet, the way they hauled him off, it stuck like a splinter under my skin. Nobody talked about him after, like he never existed, his spot on the line filled by some new kid who didn't speak, but I saw it in Eddie's eyes, the way he double-checked his rifle, his hands lingering on the bolt, in Tommy's quiet when we ate that night, his fork scraping the tin plate slow. "Could have been any of us," he said once low, his voice barely above a whisper, and I nodded, the thought cold in my gut, settling like lead. It hung over us, a silent warning. Screw up, and you're gone, erased, just another ghost in the mud. Hayes was the storm we all weathered, the eye of this hurricane of dirt and noise. Mid-30s, scarred from forehead to jaw, his voice could wake the dead, and he owned the range like a king on a battlefield. "Your meat till you shoot," he'd say, spitting tobacco into the dirt, the brown juice staining the earth, his cap tilted just enough to show he didn't care who we were, where we'd come from. I hated him, feared him, my stomach knotting every time his boots thudded closer, but he was carving us into something. Day 10, he grabbed my M14, adjusted my grip, his rough hands forcing mine into place, barking, "Like this, Carter, don't flinch, damn it." I fired, hit center, the wood cracking sharp, and he walked off, leaving me staring at the hole, my hands still tingling, my breath caught in my throat. He was breaking us to build us, and it was working, slow and cruel, his shadow a constant weight over every shot. September 17th was qualification day. 50 rounds, 3 positions, 200 yards, the sun high and the wind light, the air warm with the last breath of summer. I knelt at the line, my M14 steady now, the wood warm against my cheek, the barrel glinting faintly in the light. I fired slow, prone first, 20 hits, the dirt puffing under each shot, the echo rolling across the field. Kneeling, Tim, my knees grinding into the gravel, the stones biting through my pants. Standing, 2 more, my arms shaking but holding my breath steady, 32 total, enough to pass, my shoulder a patchwork of black and blue, swollen under my shirt. Tommy scored 45, his target's a mess of bullseyes, his laugh ringing out as he slapped my back. Eddie scraped 30, his glasses fogged, but steady, his hands less shaky now. Big Mike hit 48, grinning like he'd conquered the world, his big frame casting a shadow over the line. Hayes didn't cheer, just nodded, his voice flat, his scar catching the sun. "You're not useless yet." I sat there, rifle across my lap, the weight sinking into me, my hands raw, my ears still ringing, a dull hum that wouldn't fade. That night, back in Barracks 12, the bulb buzzed overhead, a faint yellow glow spilling across my bunk, flickering as the wind rattled the window. I pulled out paper and a pencil, the lead dull from weeks of use, the wood chipped, and wrote to Mom, my hand cramped, the words slow. "Dear Ma, I started, shot today, passed the test. It's loud, heavy, but I hit the target. Miss you and Dad." I kept going, the pencil scratching soft, about the rain soaking my boots, the mud on my face, Tommy's laugh cutting through it all, the way it echoed like home. I didn't write the fear, Riley's ghost haunting me, the way Vietnam felt real now, a place I'd walk into with this rifle in my hands, but it bled into every line, a shadow. I couldn't shake my chest tight as I scratched out the words. I tucked the letter under my pillow, lay back, the bunk creaking under me, Tommy's snores a steady drone above, the air thick with the smell of oil and damp wood. Home was fading. Mom's kitchen, the coffee pot hissing, Dad's barn, the clank of his tools, Mary Ann's voice calling me across the fields. and I wasn't sure who I was without them, who I'd become in this place. So that was September 1967 at Fort Dix. Me and that M16, slogging through mud and haze fury, turning bullets into something I could carry, something I could live with. I wasn't just Johnny from Ohio anymore. I was a soldier, or damn near it, and Vietnam wasn't a distant whisper on the radio, but a hard truth taking shape, a place I'd soon call my own. The range was behind me, but Fort Dix wasn't done. Months of grueling drills stretched ahead, each one tightening the knot, each one pulling me closer to the day I'd leave it all behind. January 1968 was coming, and with it, a ship waiting to carry us away from America, from home, into the unknown. Want to see how I said goodbye to everything I knew, how I stepped off this soil for the jungles half a world away? Stick with me, subscribe, and let's face that farewell together.